Hi, I'm comedian Tim Ross, and tonight it's the conclusion to the story about the artistic dynasty of the Olsen family. While John Olsen's career as a painter soared, his children, Tim and Louise, had to find their own way out from under John's shadow. But trouble was brewing from another side of the family that would leave the Olsens reeling and lead all the way to the Supreme Court.
Art is a river that's run through our family. It runs in our veins.
In the panorama of Australian artists, oh, he's up there in the stratosphere.
Ladies and gentlemen, John Olsen.
John Olsen is one of the great survivors of Australian art. He's in the top of the pantheon of our greatest painters.
And wash and scramble.
I'm an artist, as a dog is a dog. I didn't choose my profession, it chose me.
An artist has to have a visual grasp of the world.
He was international, he was worldly. And my mother was absolutely smitten.
He would walk away from a relationship if it meant to preserve better his genius.
When Dad left, it was like the sun had disappeared. Even though he cast great light, for me it became a shadow. Some may say, oh, to be a great artist, you have to be a selfish bastard. My father had to put his art first.
Tim started being an art dealer because he loves artists and wanted to nurture and support other people's careers.
Some lemonade?
In my abyss, I lost sight of what I really had. You know, I did have a wonderful wife. I did have a beautiful child. I did have a wonderful business, but I couldn't see it.
I think in many ways Tim medicated himself in that sorrow and that pain through alcohol.
Cheers, Stevie.
Timmy, have you got a drink?
Oh, cheers. My story is really about any of us who can turn our parents into demigods and then judge yourself against those people and feel it's too unsurmountable.
To be an artist, it's a kind of a disease. It demands things of you. It drives you crazy, and it brings you great joy. And when you're not doing it, you feel a certain kind of emptiness, a kind of being on the edge of a void. Put it up for a moment, Ken. We'll have another look.
He's in his 90s. He's a landscape painter. And though every other artist that I can think of in the world deteriorates as they get older, they're never quite as good. His work is now better.
He's had over 50 solo exhibitions. He's had major retrospectives. So he has become a household name and really part of the language of people's understanding of what art is all about. John Olsen had a bit of the ruthless beast in him, but he also had an angel as well. One of the most ruthless aspects might be found in his relationships.
Are you going to come down?
Yes, there's a couple of things I want to look at down there.
His third wife, Nola Hjorth,
Going too.
when she said, "You've got to concentrate more on my career, John, now, because I'm an artist too," he said, "Well, good luck, Nola. I kiss your foot and I'll be on my way." And he walked out and never came back.
Suddenly, he's back in Sydney, his marriage is dissolved, and he was, a little bit out of control. He was kind of like a yacht without a rudder for a little bit.
And then he met another woman, Catherine, who was on the rebound, and they finished up marrying, and so that was his fourth marriage. She wasn't an artist. She, in fact, was in love with horses and collecting horses.
It was a very quick romance. I don't think they got to know each other too well before they got really involved. But, off it went, into a new relationship, into a new landscape.
Is this the theme you've been talking about?
Oh, yes. Yes, I've been thinking about this for several months now. Catherine was a very creative person. She was very elegant and she could decorate a house with style and panache.
Catherine took over pretty much the whole running of the business that was John Olsen, and it allowed him to just get in the studio.
Oh, that was lovely, darling. Just absolutely lovely. She was building up a stud and she was buying Spanish horses, and John said, well, it's costing me a lot of money, but he was happy to see her happy and keep her happy. He loved his family, but Tim and Louise felt that John always put his art first before his marriage and before his children. And the trouble for Tim and Louise was that they really couldn't get an entree into the marriage with Catherine.
We would have loved to have had a loving relationship with Catherine, for her to have included us in her family, but it just wasn't to be. And it was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for all of us. It was heartbreaking for Dad too, that he wasn't able to really have his kids around.
Catherine was very protective of me. She should not have made it difficult for Tim and Louise to see me. I think that was very hurtful. And I'm really sorry about that.
Now, what about this? Isn't this fantastic? Yeah, I like that.
When Dad left and married women who wanted to, essentially extricate us from being around him, that was really when the drinking escalated. And it was getting to the point where I could no longer keep up the act. A couple of artists left the gallery. I was losing my family and I was about to lose my business. And that I was becoming a persona non grata.
Barry Humphries was very concerned about Tim's drinking, and he urged Tim on a number of times to try to stop drinking, and in particular to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcohol inexorably led Tim to the gates of insanity and possible death.
He ended up in hospital, and the nurses, I remember saying to me, he's going to die. If we see him again, this could be it.
We were having a family Christmas at Louise and Steve's, and it just wasn't good. And, all the family rallied around. He wasn't well, and he said that day, I need help.
The next day I was on a plane to California to rehab because it had to stop. I got led into a counsellor's office and he looked at me and leaned across the table and said, so Tim, if you keep drinking, what's the worst thing that can happen here? And I looked at him and I said, well, I could die. He said, no, Tim, that would be the best thing because you're such a pain in the ass. And that shocked me to the core. And that was really the beginning of my recovery. I was fortunate to be able to get weekends away. And I had one of my artists, Andrew Taylor, in Los Angeles, who's a very dear friend. And he happens to be married to another good friend of mine, Rachel Griffiths. And they treated me like part of the family. They took me under their wing and looked after me.
When Tim turned up at our place in LA and was like, oh, I'm going to Betty Ford, it was kind of like, well, that's a bit serious, that's a bit dramatic. Because we certainly, there was no, people calling each other about doing an intervention on Timmy. It's quite normal in America, isn't it, to get sober and go, you know what, I'm going to make this change in my life.
I ended up spending 3 months there. I had to be rebuilt psychologically. I had to, in a way, be a nobody when no one had heard of John Olsen.
If nothing had been done by him, he would have died. Certainly lost the whole business. and a life in the gutter. That's how serious it was. And I'm very proud of him.
When I started getting my life back, I started to think, oh, you know, I'm bigger than a drink now. I'm going to have a drink. Anyone trying not to drink should never go anywhere near a race course, I can tell you that now. A friend of mine invited me to his VIP tent at Melbourne Cup. There I was handed an Aperol spritzer. And the next thing I know, I'm somewhere in Paran in a nightclub sipping away on, you know, espresso martinis. And I'm thinking to myself, how did I get here? And the next morning I remember waking up being so ashamed of myself. And since then I've never picked up a drink again.
He's resisted it now for 10 years, which is just, I'm just so proud of him. And I know just how much courage and how much strength it took him to reach the other side of his drinking addiction.
When Tim became sober, it changes everything. So the dynamics change in all relationships. I mean, it changed for us. We ended up not surviving it. I mean, we'd been through a lot together. And the fact that we're still such great mates now is amazing.
Yeah, they just asked me this morning.
Oh, that's fantastic.
They want me to speak for 15 minutes. Tim and I need to realise that on our own, we're powerless over alcohol.
You know, and in those early days, you're so full of shame, and you really sort of made me feel that I was okay.
We meet here once a fortnight to have a meal and then go to an AA meeting.
I walked in and saw the steps, you know, pinned up on the wall.
I've been able to watch him grow as a human being and to develop and to come to terms with the huge shadow that his father, John Olsen, cast over him.
And you and I are on a journey which has moved from shame and high anxiety to acceptance of ourselves as we are.
Yeah. You can't spend the rest of your life blaming someone else for the way you are. You have to grow up and take responsibility for yourself.
Tim decided to write his memoir, and I know that he was anxious about whether he could pull it off. It's a very honest book.
Discovering that I could write has now made me feel happy that, in fact, I am an artist. I'm an author, and I didn't know it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the lectern Australia's greatest living artist, the father of the author, John Olsen.
Those remarks, ladies and gentlemen, are the very remarks that have made it difficult for my son. It stops you from being what you are. He's happier. Since the book has been published, he's a much more balanced person.
Was there anything in the book that you didn't like?
I put up with it. Why me?
I can't believe that I'm standing here launching a book about getting sober and launching it in a winery.
I am immensely proud of Dad from how far he's come, because although I didn't see a lot, I heard a lot about, you know, how hard it was for him. Just to see him transform himself mentally is just incredible.
Now I have this wonderful relationship with this young man. Thank God he doesn't ever remember me being drunk. He was my great inspiration.
It was Tim who was most badly damaged. Tim's sister Louise doesn't seem to me to have been damaged by having that huge, shadowy father.
Somehow we had that same calling to be artists, to be drawn into the art world.
Louise, she was aware that she was famous vicariously because of her father, but she needed to do it on her own terms.
At art school, I remember the art teacher looking over my shoulder, sort of saying, oh yes, maybe a bit like her father, or, you know, there was always that comparison.
Louise and I met the first day of art school. I just looked across the circle and just went, oh my God, look at, this is going to be fun. We went to the art gallery and we literally standing in front of 5 bells. And she said, my father painted that. There it is. It was one of those, oh, right. Okay, well, let's have a chat about that.
It's lovely, these touches of red against the blue, beautiful, discordant complementaries.
We started a creative conversation that day that's still going. And it's just alive. I mean, that is electric.
Yeah. Dinosaur Design started as a little market store at Paddington Markets, and from that point onwards, it kept growing. We started Dinosaur Designs with Leanne Rossler and Stephen and myself. We make jewellery and homewares.
You're painting ideas. Ideas are the most important thing about the work.
I felt that in the art world everybody knew me, but in the design and fashion world no one knew me or knew my family so much. So for me it was kind of quite liberating. It was a big time of Kylie Minogue and Michael Hutchins, who we were doing jewellery for at the time. We're all over the world, Russia to Japan to Europe.
I'm very proud of them because they are very creative people.
It's a good challenge, though. I like it.
And they have 100 employees. I mean, how did they learn to run that?
In so many ways, having a father like John Olsen has been so enriching. And I never took it on in my mind about being a shadow. To me, I felt incredibly lucky to have had the love and interest that I have in art, and to have 2 parents also so passionately interested in that.
Now she's gone back to painting again. It's quite funny when Louise is working away in the studio and Dad comes in and says, now, Louise, you need to put something here, and tries to grab the brush from Louise and said, no, Dad, give me the brush back. You're going to bugger it up. She's found her own voice and she's not going to let anyone else's voice in.
One thing that Dad always installed in us is you've got to work in life, and the more you work, the more life gives you in so many ways. And the relationship between them and the spaces between them. At the age I am at now, I'm not so concerned about what people feel and think about my painting. Yeah. I'm doing it because I love doing it, and I feel like I've got a voice with it. Hi, Mama. Got a lovely treat for you. Really? Yes. What's happening? Lovely present from Dad. Really? Yes. My mum, Valerie, just loved and adored my dad. And they always ended up to be great friends, even through the breakup. I'd always see them have great chats, swapping books.
That's a big thing John and I had in common. We both love poetry.
She got on with her life, definitely, and she kept painting. She really found her own voice and her own strength.
Do you remember that painting at Watson's Bay?
I do. I remember her ringing me one morning saying, oh my God, I feel like I'm having a stroke. We rushed her to the hospital. In fact, they discovered that she had a brain tumour.
One of the great things about Tim's relationship with his mother is that he was sober when she was dying.
I never forget going up to the hospice. She said to me, you know, your business and your flashy car and your fashionable friends, you know, they don't impress me at all. She said, darling, I'm just so proud you finally learned how to love yourself. She'd passed away not long after that. Dad, he said to me once that, you know, your mother was my true love. He didn't share the same mind with anyone else, the same aesthetics, the same inquiring curiosity that Mum had.
The old master hasn't lost his charm. He now enjoys the country life with fourth wife Catherine on a grand estate in Sydney's Southern Highlands.
It was a 27-year marriage, but in so many ways I think the years with Catherine Howard was difficult because there's a lot of pressure and a lot of strain on Dad, and that also meant keeping his family at bay.
Daniela.
You felt like you're walking on eggshells.
That's my girl.
If Catherine went away, that's when we'd all pile in and have a great weekend, to tell you the truth.
Are you looking very beautiful?
Catherine was fair-skinned and she discovered she had a melanoma.
She had a skin cancer that metastasised and grew into a brain tumour, and she passed away in 2016. Dad did everything possible to try and save her.
After Catherine died, an unpleasant family saga developed between John Olsen and his stepdaughter, Karen Mentink. Karen was Catherine's only daughter from her first marriage.
I was very generous to Catherine's daughter because I wanted to help her. She was given properties, and both Catherine and I did everything we can to help her.
John learned that 2 months before Catherine died, when she was quite confused following her brain surgery, her daughter Karen had driven with her to the bank. They had withdrawn $2.2 million from Catherine's account and transferred it into Karen's account.
The lawyers said, well, are you aware of this transaction? And he had no idea that this transaction had even taken place. He was really upset.
Okay, well, John, I just have one other question to ask you, which is the question I wrote you a letter about on the 8th of August, asking you if I'm still a member of your family or not.
I'm not answering any questions. I didn't say that you let me down.
He's an old man, and he does not like confrontation at all. But he was just indignant about this issue and just felt, after all he had done, to be treated like this, yeah, he was mortified.
I think he felt betrayed and hurt by what happened, and I think that's why he fought.
The Archibald Prize winner is suing Karen Mentink, claiming she pressured his late wife, Catherine Howard Olsen, to transfer money to her account. Ms Mentink denies the allegations.
Because Catherine had transferred the money at a time that she had a cognitive impairment. The case against Karen Mentink was that she'd exercised undue influence over her mother.
The 91-year-old says his wife was too ill to make that decision in the months leading up to her death from cancer in 2016.
The time of litigation fills me full of sadness that it should have come to that. And in a way, I will never recover from it. It must be my age, but I'll never recover from it.
It was really, really heartbreaking for Dad to have to go through a case, and at his age, I mean, he was 89 when the case started, and it went on for 3 years.
Karen Mentink dismissed suggestions she felt entitled to be looked after by her mother and stepfather, but admitted borrowing large sums of money.
In September 2019, John Olsen won the case. Justice John Sacker found that Karen Mentink had acted unconscionably. She had exercised undue influence over her mother. He said that she demonstrated a level of obsession with her mother's estate and was focused on her own material gain. He ordered her to repay the $2.2 million with interest and to pay court costs.
The outcome only fills me with not regret, but sadness. There are no winners in situations like that. The die is cast and forever will remain.
Just a moment, I've got to solve a culinary problem.
Oh, that's coming along beautifully.
Yes, it needs a drink of red wine. Drink of red wine? No, I don't want it to be alcoholic.
No. It's the only time I ever get to tip a bottle.
We were now able to be back in our dad's life again. It's like the doors opened again for us. We're able to draw and to cook together, to play music together again.
Ta-da!
Dad is 93 now, and we've had, the last 5 or 6 years together.
Salut. Pesetas.
To art.
Amor. E bastante tempo para gastar.
To family, food, art and nature.
Dad says, oh gosh, I love and missed you guys so much. And he realises just how much he had to sacrifice.
They love to come here. Louise has a studio. Tim cooks with me. So it's open house for them. When I went to the National Gallery in London and saw the real set-up, I said, there's no theory.
Stephen Louise's daughter Camille is also an artist.
I was actually doing a project at uni where we had to do a self-portrait in the style of Rembrandt. And
She's at National Art School, and at 22, she's having her first solo exhibition.
What a gene it must be to be those children. Camille is very good. I mean, it remains to be seen, but it looks okay. Someone said to me, can't you talk about anything but art? And I said, but what else is there to talk about?
Well, it's always been top topic in our house, isn't it? Yeah. Always. And also, Dad's grandchildren from his first marriage with Mary Flower are also very creative and very involved in the art world and are very much part of the family.
And we need another brush.
Great paintings change your life, and John Olsen has done many paintings that will have that effect, I think, in generations to come when he's no longer here.
With Dad, this driving force that painting gives him, that he just so determined about it, and when he's in the studio, he's in his happiest place.
The Australian landscape, I think it's a very rich pudding, rather fabulous. You just don't retire. It's not in my vocabulary. I enjoy the studio, which is really an artist chapel, and I like to pray here every day. A work of art should be a revelation of the unknown. That's what being creative is.
My father's never stopped loving me. He never stopped loving Louise. The older I get, I don't feel that nothing was ever done deliberately to us, to hurt us. It's part of being, a creative being. There's no lingering resentments. All the amends have been made. And we just enjoy this time because we don't know how long it'll last.
In the end, his father came back to him, which I think is a fantastic thing. I think Tim and Louise, as their relationship with John becomes better and better healed, the legacy that John has finally given them is one of love. It's all come good with the Olsens. It's all come good. It could have gone bad, but it didn't.